feel like it's worth noting that this video is going to discuss some pretty difficult topics. So while I personally tend to almost find comfort in things like this when I'm not doing well, if you don't feel like you have the capacity to listen to discussions around things like death right now, maybe this isn't worth listening to for you. Today, I turned 27 years old. The year that's unfolded since I turned 26 hasn't been great, to put things mildly. And I've been left feeling even less sure of myself and what I want from life, all while feeling sort of trapped and like I'm running out of time to start making any meaningful changes. I feel like a baby in so many circumstances. Any adult scenario I find myself in, I feel like a little kid looking up at all these grown-ups around me. It feels like it must be so obvious that I don't fit in, that everyone sees me for the baby I am. Every now and then, something happens that violently rips me out from that delusion, like a coworker asking if I have kids, because that doesn't even seem like a question that could be being asked to me in my mind. Even when I'm not physically shorter, I feel like I'm being looked down on, that I don't have the capacity to actually make decisions for myself, or the information required to make the right ones. There's so much complexity in the world and the systems we force ourselves to live within. I have to believe I'll be fine. There are so many people out there just living day to day who get to continue to live. But I just can't shake the feeling that I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm not doing enough, and that what I am doing, I'm doing wrong. I've had to take on a roommate, and that's fine. But it can also make me feel trapped in my own home, and make me dread coming home just because I don't fully know what to expect. And this is something I can't really see a way out of. I can't afford to pay the bills just living by myself, and I don't see a way for that to change unless I somehow got a job that paid much more than what I'm making right now. I find I can feel so much more isolated and alone when there are others around. If I'm at home by myself, fine, whatever. If I'm at home alone, but my roommate has his girlfriend over and they're talking and laughing and having fun while I'm feeling down, then I just start feeling miserable instead. Loneliness loathes company. I want to start from scratch, go back and relive my life. I can't help but feel like there's so much I missed out on, and I'm playing catch up now, which only inevitably means I'm missing out on the things I should be experiencing now because I'm stuck trying to experience the things I should have already experienced. This might seem a little silly, but I remember replaying through Life is Strange and finding that even though I was playing through it with the intention of seeing things I hadn't before, I kept making more or less the same choices because those just felt right for Max's character. So even if I did have a chance to redo my life, I'd probably still wind up making a lot of the same choices. Because at the end of the day, I'd still be me, and maybe that's the real problem. It feels so limiting to only get to experience life from one perspective. I wish I could get a chance to be someone else. A lot of what I'd felt I knew about my own wants and desires have been uprooted and forced to at least somewhat be re-examined, because of the absolute worst thing that I've had to live through. My dad died this year. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer late October last year, and things were looking promising for quite a while. He'd always been strong and able to take on anything life threw his way, and thankfully up until around July, he was able to do almost all the things he loved to do. He had an incredible ability to take things as they came, and just remain calm and level-headed. And even thought of his diagnosis as a blessing because it afforded him the opportunity to sit down and reflect on his life. He was never scared, and I really admire that. When my grandpa passed away in 2015, despite a strong faith, he was scared to go. And I felt that I wanted to get to a place in my life where I wouldn't be scared when my time came. And my dad wasn't. I mean, I can't say that fully for sure because I wasn't in his mind, but he'd always seen death as something inevitable and not worth worrying about. And that seemed to hold true through his final moments. In July, he had to go get some stents put in, and after that, he was in pain and having a hard time eating. My grandma had actually also been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer not long after my dad had, and she'd had a stent put in that got infected, and once it was replaced, she bounced back quite well. So, thinking that would likely be the case for Dad, a younger, stronger person, my mom pushed to get him back in to have the stents looked at. Unfortunately, they were only able to get proper access to one, and while the other one was able to get partially working, the tumors had grown too much for it to be replaced or actually worked on. July 26, I was out of town for my first off-the-island race night. Dad was going into the hospital as I set out Friday morning. Before I'd left, he'd said if all went well, he'd try to get out Saturday night to join me. That didn't happen, but we were still texting throughout the night. When I got back from what was honestly a really fantastic experience, I came home to a week in the hospital by my dad's side. At first, we were still trying to get him to come home. He was in a shared room at the time, and I was a little hesitant to fully engage myself into conversation about the race weekend he'd missed, because there was someone else in the room, and Dad was struggling to talk a bit, and it seemed like we'd have another opportunity to talk, one where he'd be able to be more engaged. But by pretty much the next day, it had started to become apparent that he wasn't going to be leaving the hospital. It's a strange, surreal experience to be sitting next to someone as they die. You almost start just waiting for them to die. Because in that moment, all you can see is suffering. Suffering that you want to be over. You're not really thinking about how once that suffering ends, it all ends for them. That's it. My dad was 60 years old. I was in the hospital room next to him when he died. I know that beforehand he hadn't wanted his kids to see him in a state like that, but my sister and I wanted to be there, and I think ultimately he was happy to have us there, to be surrounded by the people he loved in his final moments. His wife, who I could tell there were moments where he just wanted to be with her. This woman he'd shared most of his life with, whom he loved and who loves him. I'm so thankful for all the moments I was still able to share with Dad, even after his diagnosis, and that I was able to be there with him in his final moments. That he was able to spend those moments with the people he loved most. That's not something many people get. I had read in an article a few years back about a dying man that accidentally had his brain activity recorded as he passed, and they found there was a flurry of brain activity after death that continued well after medical death would have been declared, suggesting that, provided you die in a way that allows for it, your brain processes your death. You can live in your memories for what, to you, would feel like an eternity. I find that really comforting, and after Dad died, I talked a bit about some of my favorite memories with him, hoping that might still be heard or appreciated by him as he processed the end of his life. There was a nurse there who came in on Dad's final day who hadn't been there previously, who found herself weeping at the sight of him, saying that's not something she ever does, but that she could tell he was someone special. She'd said she'd have to ask to be reassigned, but my mom asked she stay on. There was something meaningful about her being there, I feel. I could easily see her being seen as an angel presence, depending on your personal beliefs. I don't know where I lie myself these days, but I can't say that didn't feel like there was something sort of meaningful about that. Being with my dad in his final moments, seeing the love he had for my mom, for my sister and I, it made me see the beauty in sharing your life with someone more than a friend. If I suddenly found myself in my deathbed, who would be by my side, and would it even be the people I'd want to be there? For a long time, I felt I didn't want to get married, that it didn't appeal to me, and I think that's still largely true, but I could see in that week that there is something special about having someone you've shared your life with like that. My friend Max flew in from Calgary for Dad's funeral. Most of the rest of my friends were already in town, mostly just by coincidence, and I found a lot of comfort in seeking normalcy with my friends in those days. I really wasn't expecting Max to fly out, but it was really nice to have him there. For a long time, I'd fretted about my future turning out like that of my dad's friend, Brian, who he'd sort of lost touch with. My dad had gotten married while Brian hadn't, living alone with a bunch of cars. A future I can easily see for myself. Granted, none of my friends have gotten married yet, but I always feared my friends would get married and move on with life and I'd be left behind. But my dad and Brian reconnected, so that fear no longer feels so menacing. My dad had begun to write out some stuff for his funeral before he died. He hadn't made it past the section about friends, but in there he wrote about how with him and Brian, it never seemed to matter how much time passed. They could always pick up their friendship and feel just as close. So I don't feel I need to worry so much about becoming a Brian anymore. About a month after my dad passed, my grandma had a fall, wound up in the hospital, and pretty quickly passed away as well. I called her the night before she died. Like my dad, she really couldn't talk at all at that point, but she could listen. And I told her a bit about my week. At first, I was going to wait to call until the next morning because it was sort of late, and I'm really glad I didn't. She was 89. She'd lived a long, full life. I just wish she hadn't had to experience her son dying before she had. It felt so wrong. Dad should have been at that funeral. He should have been able to share his experience of being her son. But that's not how it worked out. My dad passed August 2nd, and my grandma on September 16th. It feels like these losses are only becoming more and more real as time goes on. I know people often say it gets easier, but I can't help but feel like it will only get harder. As more things happen that I can't share with my dad, the fact he's not here will only become more and more apparent. It felt so strange for the racing season to wrap up without my dad being around. That I couldn't share with him when my car was protested and when it inevitably passed the inspection without a hitch. Racing was something we shared, and had become really close over, particularly in the last few years, even though it's something we'd been doing together since 2011. It's something I love and something I'm going to keep doing, but it's going to be very different and much more difficult without him. Life in general is going to be very different and much more difficult. How do you recover from something like this? I know nothing in life is guaranteed, and I know that, unfortunately, everyone has or will experience a loss like this at some point in their life, but that understanding doesn't make things easier. So far, I've been able to mostly just keep moving forward, but how do you make progress and not just keep blindly moving forward? It's only going to keep getting more difficult, and the loss will only continue to feel more and more real, but life keeps moving forward, and I know my dad would want me to keep moving forward. I just wish I had a semblance of an idea of what I wanted to work towards, because I just can't help but feel like it's starting to get too late.